Fields. I work in site remediation with the training committee and want to welcome everybody here. Got a really good turnout today for our child care presentation. We also have web participants. I don't know how many, but you know what? We can make these slides real now, right? All right. We have quite a few people on the web to welcome as well. And when Diane Pupa comes up, she's going to introduce actual real people from other agencies that we coordinate with, and we're really excited about them being here. I just wanted to say that this is the first short course that DEP is going to be offering continuing education credits for LSRPs. Those of you that are in the room and stay to the very end, I know who you are, and I'll make sure you stay to the end, will earn 3 CECs. We're very excited about that. In order to get those, you have to definitely sign in and sign out, and we'll give you a certificate. For you guys on the web, I'm sorry you can't earn CECs yet. In order to do that, we would have to do testing and all that stuff, and we're just not geared up for that right now. So the need for this course was identified from your course evaluations at previous sessions, and I'm holding up a lilac piece of paper that is the course evaluation. I will wrestle you to the ground at the end of this to get one from you. It's really important that you give us feedback and ideas for future training. That's where this one came from. And also Diane had approached the training committee and said, we really need to do training on this. This is a very confusing topic. And hopefully today you'll get, you won't be confused anymore. Right, yeah. Okay, when over time we have problems with the sound, people complain about the sound on the web. So what I'm going to enforce today is that question askers and question answerers wait for the microphone. We'll bring microphones around and so that everybody on the web can hear you. It's important. I also want to announce in the spring the training committee and DP will be doing regulatory training at Rutgers, probably starting in March, an all-day sessions that will count as a prerequisite for someone sitting for the LSRP exam or for CECs. So watch for that. Dan Toder was supposed to be with us this afternoon, but I think he was held up a little bit. We are being sponsored by the LSRPA. You've all heard, a lot of you have heard his talk. I don't think I can recreate it, but the refreshments in the back are from them, and they help us coordinate these trainings and get you all signed up to come. Let's go through the slides. Okay, they have a lot of sponsors that they rely on, and there's too many to count. Next. Okay, these are the future trainings. Dan is on their education and outreach, and that's what is planned for the near future, right, Mr. Katz? Yes. Yes, ma'am. Next. Oh, and thank you to the sponsors for their support. We thank the sponsors. And without further ado, we're going to look at this. Isn't this the best? Guess who that is? The Diane Pupa is going to give you everything you ever need to know, but we're afraid to ask about child care. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Tess. Well, first of all, thank you for attending in person and on the webinar. I know this is a much-needed course, and we were well aware of your needs. And we struggled internally because we wanted to sort of get a feel for an understanding for the LSRP program in general. Make sure you all understood that, with the whole learning of the forms and submitting the reports to DEP in a timely way and all of that. We didn't want to muddle the waters with child care, and because we are a little different than the rest of SRP from time to time. So we did not want to confuse everybody all at once. We wanted to let you get used to the new LSRP program and then slowly introduce childcare. So we're really at a point now where we need to talk about it. I get calls every day, and I speak to most of you, and I thank you for calling. We have some great dialogues. We have some great emails. So I'm really happy that all of you do reach out to me, and hopefully we can get some answers to some questions that people have through this training. I'm thinking about going back to that higher style. What do you think? Again, we know it's long overdue. So what I want to focus on today is let's talk about the New World Order of LSRP as it applies to child care and schools. The role of the various state agencies. As you probably know by now, there's a lot of other programs, a lot of other departments that are involved in this process, and we're very happy, as Tess indicated, to have the representatives here today. We have multiple people from Office of Licensing, Children and Families. We have Department of Health here. We have Community Affairs in the back. And we also have a representative from DEP as our drinking water program. We have a representative from DEP for our Office of Permit Coordination that coordinates with schools. So we have some really neat people here today. The new process does differ a little bit than the rest of SRP, and I'll go over the highlights to that. I also want to update you on some information that's coming, some existing information, and then we're going to go through some case studies. Phil Brilliant at the end will be providing some great case studies. Let's back up 1 second, how we got to be here. Is there anybody in this room that has not heard of Kitty College? I never, those are like two words that just, as a regulator, make our hair stand up when we hear that. That was really the impetus for this program, for the child care program. And it was about, long story short, it was about a child care center that opened on a former thermometer plant, mercury plant. And I like to refer to it when I give talks as really the perfect storm, which it was. It was a site that went bankrupt. The RPs moved on, sat vacant for quite a long time. DEP, it was on our monitoring list. We were well aware of it. It was a former ISRA trigger. As I said, they went bankrupt. They walked away, and DEP had been monitoring this site. One day we go, routine monitoring, and lo and behold, the child care center's there, and the rest is really history. Created this program and started a whole wave of things in site remediation program. Started a lot of reforms because obviously the first question that people ask is, how the bleep did that happen? Really, DEP, you knew about this site, how did it happen? So we had a lot of explaining to do. So what we found out through some very difficult self-examination was there were some holes. There was a lack of communication. There was a lot of agencies that were involved in some ancillary way, some major way, and none of them really spoke to each other. So what we did was we did a self-evaluation of environmental protection. Children and Families asked the same question, how did that happen? Department of Health, same, and the same thing with Community Affairs. So that whole thing led to a task force that was created by the governor at the time to do this self-examination and to plug up any loopholes that existed so that hopefully never would happen again. And that led to some legislative reforms through DEP. Hey!
I swiped your notes.
It's okay. If I don't know it by now, then we all should go home.
Sorry.
That's all right. So it led to some legislative reforms, and I'll go through those in a second. Also some interagency changes, and I will go through that in a minute. And as well as DEP, the SRP program itself, had to look at ourselves and say, how did this happen and what can we do to prevent it? So it really forced some difficult decisions. The key legislative reform that came out of this was the Madden Bill. And that basically required that facilities that were going to be used for educational purposes, child care centers, had to obtain formerly an NFA, now an RAO in the New World Order, prior to the issuance of a CO and/or construction permit. And it also indicated that DOH had to adopt regulations for indoor air and set standards for building interiors. And all of that did happen. DOH did codify their rules, and they do have indoor standards now for child care centers. And in addition, through all of that self-evaluation of SRP, when we realized we had about 20,000 cases that we couldn't possibly manage, that we needed some help, the Site Remediation Reform Act was created in 2009, and obviously all of you are familiar with that. You're all LSRPs and attorneys, et cetera, et cetera. So there were some very key things that were born out of that disaster. Children and families did some tweaking of their rules. It indicated that the child care centers must have a DEP clearance, now a RAO, approval, and a DOH approval before they would issue a license to operate. So at the time when this first was created in 2007, what we did was we went through all of the existing child care centers. We obtained a list from Children and Families, went through the list, and as they came up for renewals, they had to perform an evaluation of the site to ensure that we did not have another child care center open on a kiddie college type situation. So from 2007, June 1st, 2007, through like June 1st, 2010, all the renewals took place. We did find some issues, not a lot, probably about less than 1% had problems, and we made them address those problems. But for the most part, I'm happy to report that we really didn't find another kiddie college. Thank God. Then when the LSRP program was created, now you all will be acting and doing the things that DEP did, and I'll go through that later on. As part of the changes and the amendments, DEP did make some changes to their already existing rules. Not only did we create the Site Remediation Reform Act, but we changed some things in the UST rules and the ISR rules and the Brownfield rules and things like this. So this list over here doesn't necessarily pertain exactly to child care center. I'm just pointing out to you that there were other regulatory changes in the site remediation program beside the SRRA. Well, the key question, right, everybody wants to know, and this is a very common question I get, maybe not from you guys so much, but some of the child care centers that are trying to open, or the schools, who's all involved and when and how does all this work? It is very confusing, but I'm happy to explain it to you, and I hope to make the process easier. There are multiple agencies involved. The lead agency is Children and Families. They are the ones that license these child care centers. So these centers are their regulated community. DEP and DOH are ancillary to the process. We're part of it, but we're only a small part of it. If you picture a triangle, isosceles triangle, Children and Families is at the top. They're the lead. They rule. DEP and DOH are the other points on the triangle. DCF, their role, they conduct inspections. Usually they even go out as a courtesy and do a courtesy inspection beforehand. They'll explain their process later on. And of course then they issue the license to the child care centers. When do they get involved? Well, when you're applying for new construction for a child care center, or during relocation or renewal. So Children and Families is your lead. Then, of course, our program, Site Remediation, DEP is involved. In the old world, we did the reviews, we wrote the approval letters. In the New World Order, you are acting on our behalf. You are writing the letters, you're writing the RAOs. So what we do now is we will perform comprehensive reviews, key point, comprehensive reviews of all child care centers and schools, all sensitive populations. We will review them. We also have our technical staff from the field offices helping out. They are doing field inspections of your work. So, for example, if you are capping a property, capping a problem, they will go out and inspect what you've done. In addition to doing reviews of the RAO and the documentation, they are also doing a courtesy field visit. When do they get involved? Well, we get involved after the RAO is written and submitted. We are after the fact. You are in control. So what you do, the decisions you make, is paramount to this process. We are after the fact. We will review the work after it's done. So Office of Licensing will be looking at your RAO. So what you send them has to be right. There's no room for error here, folks. You're putting kids on properties that have an environmental evaluation, and you're attesting to the fact that everything's okay. You are signing that document. Department of Health is involved. Once you all write your RAO, you submit everything to DEP, and you have all of that guidance already on the web, on the SRP page. There is guidance documents on how to create an RAO. There are child care inserts that you should be using. After the RAO is written, the next agency your clients need to deal with is Department of Health. They will advise as to whether or not some type of indoor air evaluation has to be done. What their role is they look at the indoor environments and will make an assessment by reviewing the indoor environmental health assessment form, and they'll determine what sampling is necessary. And they look at a variety of things. I know a lot of people think, oh, VOs, indoor air sampling, VOs, TO15. There's more to it than that. They look at a lot of other things. They look at asbestos and radon and lead paint and a variety of things. So again, they get involved after the RAO is written, but again, before the license is issued. They will issue a clearance letter. So once your client has the RAO, they have the clearance letter from health, they're good to go with those two pieces of the puzzle. But Children and Families has a whole checklist of things that centers must have before they can get licensed. So there are only two pieces of the puzzle, the environmental, the indoor environmental and the outdoor environmental. Department of Community Affairs is involved from time to time. I will say at the very bottom, when do they get involved? Sort of as an ad-needed basis. They're the agency that oversees the implementation of the UCC, Uniform Construction Code laws, and the standards enforced by the local municipal officials. So you're really dealing with the municipal official, but there have been times from time to time that there's been some difficulty or disagreement, or they couldn't find something, or they didn't think something was done properly. So if there's any issue you're having difficulty with the local code enforcement official of the town, and you don't think something was done correctly or just whatever, we have contact information. Community Affairs oversees them. The local officials are their regulated community. So if you think an official did something, for whatever reason, there's just a difficult situation, whatever, you need to speak to somebody, you would speak to our counterparts at Community Affairs. All right, well, those are child care centers, but we also have the school component, because again, it's educational facilities, so schools apply too. There's a couple of different ways the school people get involved, and it is really very site-specific and situation-specific. I'll go over it as quickly as I can or as thoroughly as I can, but you will need to ask the individual agencies if the situation applies to your particular situation. Okay, so for instance, Department of Education, they're the lead agency, but only under specific conditions. What's their role? Well, for Madden subject sites that are undergoing capital review, capital project review, okay, and there's the citation. For land acquisition, if the local municipality is acquiring land and they want to open a new school, they may be subject to that citation. And you would have to, there's also something called Executive Order 215 that speaks to construction using state money more than $1 million. Okay, and that I have listed is the link for that Executive Order 215. Again, it's a very specific set of criteria. If you meet that criteria, then you need to get Department of Education involved in the project. There's usually some type of environmental review that goes along with acquiring that land in accordance with those rules, that rule citation there, and those people work with our Office of Permit Coordination. And Ruth Foster is here today from DEP's Office of Permit Coordination, so later on in the question session, if you have any question about schools or something, Ruth can probably help you out. But I just wanted to give you an idea, a sense that it is a very specific set of circumstances. They're not always involved. So just be mindful of that. Then there's a possibility where you might have a situation where the School Development Authority is involved. Their role, they're the lead agency for construction in certain types of school districts, formerly known as the Abbott School Districts. Again, there are specific criteria that have to be met. So again, they have their own web page. We have the resource contact information at the end of this presentation. So if you have any questions, you think you need to get them involved, you have the information you need. Okay, Madden in a nutshell. Well, what was it? What is it? Well, obviously to keep kids safe. That's the paramount reason that it was created. So buildings that are slated for use as a child care center or school, if they're doing some type of new construction, if they're doing a renovation where you are increasing the square footage, and or you're changing the use of a building on a contaminated site, an ISRA site, a bus site, or you have one of the specific, it meets the specific UCC codes listed in the Madden bill, or if you have suspected contamination. And by suspected contamination, it could be as simple as former ag use property. You had ag use, you were applying pesticides, whether you were allowed to do it or not, you still could have residual problems, and you don't want children playing in arsenic-contaminated soil. So the Madden is sort of a two-pronged definition. If you are creating a school or child care center, and it's a new construction, it's a renovation, you're changing square footage, and you're on a contaminated site, you have one of those UCC codes, or a suspected contaminated site, you are triggered. You're triggering Madden. Here are the specific codes in Madden. S, storage. H, high hazard. F, factory. M, gas station. B, dry cleaner, nail salon. What does Madden say? The Madden language clearly says requires entire site. Says NFA in the specific language, but of course we all know that means RAO now, prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy or construction permit. Clearly says entire site. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. Some of the key points that came out of Madden. Well, obviously, the child care unit was created, and it really was the first in the nation. Is it okay if I brag for a few minutes? Because I think it's really important. It really is. I've had multiple conversations in the 5 years that I've been doing this with other states, and they're just sort of in awe of what we all put together and how we work together, and the concept of having 4 state agencies, 5 state agencies interact and have intercoordination meetings and things like that is just unfathomable to them. So I'm happy and I'm proud of our program, and I'm happy to pass it along to you because I know you'll take good care of it, right? Okay, I'll be checking. So anyway, it's first in the nation, and are regulated by a bunch of different state agencies that I've just gone through. We have our interagency coordination meetings. We had more of them in the past as we were up and running. Now things seem to be sort of, even keel. But we will meet on an as-needed basis, and we constantly talk to each other. We're always emailing or on the phone or whatever. We are a close-knit group of folks that work very well together. And what also came out of Madden was you must receive environmental clearances through the RAO and the IHE letters, environmental health letters, for new construction and renewal applications. Okay, so for child care centers, what does that actually mean? Well, to obtain an RAO, you really need to do a preliminary assessment for the entire property. Okay, now this is where we're going to be a little different from maybe the rest of SRP. Because I know, like in the Israel program, you would look at a certain set, a certain building or whatever, and you would look at a particular property. This, we are looking at the entire property. Not necessarily saying you have to do everything on the entire property to clean it up. I'm just saying you have to be mindful. If you have a very large parcel of land, you need to pay attention as to what your possible AOCs are on that property. So you need to do an entire site preliminary assessment. And of course with child care, we focus on play areas. The kids are playing in a particular location. So the emphasis is on play area and the drinking water supplied. We don't want kids drinking water with any type of contaminants in it. They're obviously young, they're growing, and they can be very easily affected by any contaminants. So the focus is on the drinking water and the play areas. And then, of course, LSRPs will issue RAOs for an entire site or leasehold, depending on the situation. But they're no longer going to receive NFA letters from DEP. We are out of that business. We do not issue NFA letters. Okay, how child care is a little different than the rest of SRP? Well, we are the receptor. The child care center and the school now is sort of considered the potential receptor. See, in most cases, you're dealing with a contaminated site. No sensitive population on it. You're dealing with some industrial site, whatever. And your receptors are usually off-site. You're usually looking around the property, looking to see where the groundwater plume's going, what it's going to impact, et cetera, et cetera. Now you have to sort of change your mind a little bit, your thinking a little bit. We are the receptor in this program, the child care centers and the schools. So you really need to look at performing a radius search. I know the first thing everybody's going to say, how many feet do I have to look? How many feet? Can't say that. I don't know. If I tell you 400 feet and there's a Superfund site 405 feet away, are you not going to look at that because it's 5 feet different? I can't give you we use a rule of thumb. I'm going to say 2,000 feet. If you're going to ask me, I'm going to say, oh, you're 2,000 feet. You need to look around. We have all kind of resources on our DEP GIS layer. You have a lot of resources available to you to find out what contaminated sites are around that potential child care center. And one of the things I want to you to think of too is we're used to thinking of, okay, soil, groundwater. Don't forget the air, people. Don't forget the air. We've had cases where we've had auto paint body shops adjacent to a play area where they had an exhaust fan blowing VOCs toward the play area. They were asked, and they gladly complied. They altered their system so that the VOCs were not impacting the kids in the play area. So don't just get focused on soil, water. Really look at everything. Auto paint shop, of course your contaminated site, of course your dry cleaners, nail salons. Car demolition, we had another big case. Car demolition not too far away. They were demolishing all these cars and they were having a lot of heavy metal settling out on the play area. So really think long and hard of where you're going to place these child care centers, because they can have impacts on many, many different types of different media. Another area how we're a little different than the rest of SRP is that we would like the PA, SI, RI, RAR, RAO, all the supporting documentation in one package. Send it all to us. We'll review everything. We have child care inserts in the RAO for you to use that address that address play areas and that address the drinking water as well. Those inserts need to be in there. And remediation is usually done within a year to obtain a license, because remember, the incentive is to get that license, is to get that center open. They need to make money. And so the remediation for these centers is usually driven by the need to open. So we're fortunate in the child care business, and when we do our reviews, is that we usually have the packages all together, and we can just go right through it, boom, boom, boom. RAO's issued, Children and Families, this is the license, next one. Move on to the next site. So we are a little different in that regard. So as I said a few minutes ago, the outdoor requirements, DEP, the outdoor requirements, environmental outdoor requirements include the preliminary assessment for the entire property, not just the leasehold portion, if you're dealing with a lease. All areas of concern on the property need to be, you need to be aware of them, not just the leasehold portion. Of course, the play areas are a key component to this equation, and sampling is usually done within the top 6 inches of the soil. Again, you're going to be thinking direct contact issues. Kids are playing in the soil. So we focus on the top 6 inches. It also includes evaluating naturally occurring contaminants. Now, I know you don't have to remediate naturally occurring contamination under the new SRRA and things like that. However, you need to be mindful. You don't want to put children in a play area that has, I don't care if it's a naturally occurring arsenic, it's still arsenic. So we do require you to at least put some type of surface covering on the play area at a minimum. Again, to eliminate the direct contact exposure. It's all about the direct contact exposure. And then same thing for the former ag sites. Consider potential contamination. That needs to be evaluated as well, because you still could have pesticides lingering in the soil, and it still could create a problem for the children. So this is where we're a little different. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, health will look and be concerned with the indoor environments, their indoor environment program. And the evaluation that's usually done at these centers deals with lead paint issues, radon, even mold. Even mold. There's been many a time where they've had leaking roofs and ceiling tiles and things like that, and health will put that in their letters. They will come out and do an inspection, and they will evaluate all of these things: mold, asbestos, VOCs. If it was a former funeral home, that's very common too. If you think of funeral homes, right, most of them are decorated very nicely. They look like a house. So a lot of them, they look like a very residential setting. A lot of people convert those into child care centers. You need to be mindful of that. The PA should point that out, and then health will likely have you sample indoor air. And there have been a few instances where, they've had high formaldehyde issues. So these are the kinds of things that health will assess with you, and then ultimately, once everything's satisfactory, they will issue a clearance letter. As I mentioned before, play areas and drinking water, two primary things we are concerned with in child care. And so the drinking water must meet the MCLs. The SOCs, the synthetic organic compounds, and the secondary monitoring is really not required anymore. And Safe Drinking Water, Bureau of Safe Drinking Water can advise you as to that. They have a whole web page dedicated to not only private well testing parameters, but for child care parameters. So they have a whole guidance plan for you to evaluate on their web. So back to drinking water for child care centers, you could either be on public water, they could either be on public water, or they could have a private well. So if they're on public water, include the PWSID number, and the water bill really does need to match the address. There have been instances where people have tried to convince other people that, oh yeah, it's being served by this. There's some really crazy water connections in some towns, so especially sometimes in schools. So I just want you to be mindful of that. Pay attention to the addresses and make sure you confirm that, yes, that water system is serving that particular property you're writing an RAO for. Or sometimes they're on a private well. There's a whole list of parameters, as I just said to you, on the drinking water, the water resource webpage. I think water supply webpage, I mean. And sometimes you might have to alter those parameters a little bit based on the location or maybe the prior use, the historical operations at the property. So if you think of contaminants like the naturally occurring contaminants like arsenic, gross alpha, we had a particular instance where there was a previous landscaping business that was at a site for many decades. They were on a private well. Eventually they did want to convert, and they converted to a child care center. We had them expand their parameters to include pesticides. So there's going to be times where, based on the prior use, you're going to have to step out of that box and say, okay, this makes sense to do this, to expand the parameters for this particular compound or compounds because of the past operations. Ultimately, what you want, what you're trying to acquire, is a certification letter. It used to be Bureau of Safe Drinking Water. I think now it's technically a different name. Kristen?
Oh, it's Bureau of Water System Engineering.
Thank you. That's Brad Koffler from that program. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, so they just had a name change recently. But that's what you want. You want that certification letter, and that certification letter should be in the information that you send to DEP. Yes, I have an RAO. It addresses the drinking water certification, and here's a copy of my cert letter. That is stated in the drinking water webpage, and that is what we've been doing since the program began in 2007. If you have that documentation, you need to supply it. That needs to be all part of the package that you based your professional judgment on issuing that RAO. And as you may or may not know, the licenses are up for renewal every 3 years. So there is a renewal process, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And that renewal process, you will be asked likely to sample that well again. They will be, your client, I mean, will be asked to sample that well again to make sure nothing has changed, make sure no contaminants have migrated onto the property. So when you write that RAO and you have a private well, please be mindful that you have current data. You are basing that RAO on current drinking water data. Don't use the previous one from 3 years ago, or don't try to. It'll get flagged. Just a quick review. Picture's nice. Private well, public water systems is the general. You have community water systems, or your big, large municipalities, and they are very highly regulated. So as long as they are on public water, they supply, used to be Bureau of Safe Drinking Water. What is it again, Brad? That bureau, they, no, Bureau of Water System Engineering. They supply that information to them on a daily and monthly basis. They sample these public water systems under the Safe Drinking Water Act ad nauseum. They have tons and tons and tons of data. So as long as they're in as a public water system, they're fine. Okay? Yes?
I also, we have reorg, so safe drinking water does get involved, that is submitted to public water system, safe drinking water, and then pure water system follows up on.
Hello? I'm going to actually say that again into the microphone so that the people on the web can hear you too. Hold on. Thank you.
Well, now there's actually, when you submit data through a public water system like coliform sampling, it goes, gets submitted to Bureau of Safe Drinking Water, and then Bureau of Water System Engineering gets involved with, reviewing that water quality data for the child care center.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great. Yep. So public water systems are very highly regulated, sampled to death. So if they're on a public water system, we're good with that. It's when they come on this side of the slide, the non-community water systems, you can have schools be part of that, okay, as well as they can be non-transient, non-community water systems, also schools, depending on the number of children they serve and the number of connections. So all my point is on this slide is these guys, community water system, highly regulated. If they're part of a public water system, good to go. When you're on this side of the slide, you just need to be mindful of the parameters required on the water supply page. That's all I'm trying to say with this. I'm not trying to, confuse the issue at all. All right, what are some of the common things we have found now that we've been doing this for a while? What are some of the things that we found? Well, I don't think this is going to be a surprise to many people. We're finding a lot of historic fill out there, especially in North Jersey. Historic fill and PAHs, metals. So, obviously we can't have children playing in historic fill contamination. So, we are requiring deed notice and an RA permit for the property before you issue the RAO. I don't think that should be a surprise to most people. We have naturally occurring contaminants, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. Again, to eliminate the direct contact exposure, you need to put some type of surface on the play area. We see that a lot. It's very common, these two things. Sometimes there are actual AOCs right in the play area. A couple of times we've seen some tanks. We've seen various, maybe a few times we've seen transformers. We've seen a few things in a play area. So you would have to sample for the appropriate parameters and frequency based on what you're finding. But if you're not finding anything, any play area AOC, the play area itself should be sampled if it's a grassy play area. Just because you don't have a technical AOC, the fact that you're putting children on a site and you're not sampling it is problematic. So if there's a play area, it's a grassy play area, we still would want you to sample. Now I know you're going to say, well, what am I going to sample for? That's your professional judgment. If you don't have any data, you don't have any information, you might want to sample for many things. Some people have limited to a limited number of parameters. But there should be some evaluation. You're putting children on a site for the first time. And if there's nothing on that play area, it's just grass or soil or something like that, there should be some sampling done. And I will say to you that that isn't anything different than what we're doing now. Let me just back up a second. I know the LSRP program is new, and yes, there are a lot of rules and a lot of time frames that you have to follow, but the overall concept of what child care is doing has not changed, people, and Phil will speak to that later when he goes over some of his slides. The overall concept is you're going to protect children, direct contact and drinking water, now and any future contamination that could impact that site. That's why you're looking around the property. You're going to see what other contaminated sites are there. This is not anything new. We've been requiring people to do these types of things when we were reviewing the PA reports ourselves. So for the last 5 years, when we were reviewing the PAs, I'll get to your question in a second, we have been requiring this. So this should not be anything new that you're hearing. What is new is that we are not going to tell you what the parameters are, how many. That's your professional judgment. You have that power to do it as you see fit. I think we were going to do questions at the end, no? And then the same type of logic applies for the former ag use. We found many problems on sites that had prior ag use. So sampling should be done, and sampling should be geared, those parameters should be geared toward that. We've also found, like I said, some transformer issues, so you would have to, sample for PCBs. We've had issues, let me mention this about play areas. Sometimes play areas are on a different property. I don't know if any of you came across that yet, but that is an occurrence from time to time, where maybe there's two properties close together, two lots, and the play area is next door, or it's across the street, or something like that. So if you have a play area that's across the street, you need to do a PA for that property as well. Again, that's where you're putting the children, is on that play area over there. So you do have to do a play area for that specific lot. And then the RAO would be for the two lots. Okay, the common question everybody wants to know, when is an LSRP really needed in child care? Well, I can answer that very easily. If you trigger the Madden legislation. Okay, so if it's a new or relocating center and it's on a suspected contaminated site, the child care center is going to be on a suspected contaminated site, former ISRA site, former bus site, meets one of those UCC triggers listed, and you're doing, like I said, new or relocation or a renovation or something, you're going to trigger Madden. Yeah, you need to have an LSRP. The LSRP then will oversee whatever remediation is necessary and issue the RAO. But there also is a caveat when an LSRP isn't needed. If the site is not subject to Madden, you've done a PA, you're a consultant, you're not an LSRP now, you take your LSRP hat off, you're a consultant, you can hire a consultant to do a PA for child care. They don't find anything. If you don't find anything in the history that would trigger Madden, it's not any one of those contaminated sites, suspected contaminated site, you don't necessarily need to do an RAO. You can do a PA, and the department will issue a approval letter. Or you don't need an LSRP if the child care unit has already NFA'd the case. Or there's an existing child care center, an existing approval letter, and let's say one center wants to move into another location. That happens a lot. Anybody notice that? They move around a lot. It's like a shell game. As soon as they can, I guess sometimes, they lease the property. Most child care centers don't own the property. A lot of them lease. They move. If they get a different rent that's lower, a different location, blah, 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 they move. So if there's been an environmental clearance on a property and as a child care center A leaves and a month later child care center B wants to move into there, do they necessarily have to hire an LSRP and get an RAO? No. We're certain it's not a Madden trigger. There's been a PA. It's been evaluated. We've issued a letter. So there are times, there's not a lot, but there are times when they don't need an LSRP. later. Write it down, though, don't forget it.
I did.
All right. Okay. So if I own a property, I want to put a child care center there, I need to get an entire site RAO. Right? I own the property. Madden clearly says entire site. You don't, again, what's the intent of Madden? The intent of the Madden legislation is not to expose children to contaminated sites. There are times when child care centers lease the property. There's a lot of times when they lease the property. So it is appropriate to do a leasehold or AOC RAO. It is appropriate. But be mindful. You have to look, the PA has to be for the entire property. You have to know that if it's in a strip mall, you have a dry cleaner next door or 2 doors down, or a nail salon, or you had a print shop operating, and they're remediating their particular part of the site. So you need to be mindful of what is there. You need to look at those contaminated sites or those potential contaminated sites and make an evaluation as to whether or not it makes sense to put a child care center there. When we review reports, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing comprehensive reviews of everything that comes in for child care center or school, regardless. Done. You're doing it. We're doing it. On all RAOs for sensitive populations. These are the department's highest priority sites. Okay, please keep that in mind. These are sensitive populations. We take it very seriously. And knock wood, for the last 5 years, we haven't had any other kiddie colleges, thank God. So now we are going to be passing that baton. We have passed it to you. Let's try to, we need to keep it that way. We need to go above and beyond to demonstrate that these sites are clean, they are okay, and we're putting our children on these properties. The LSRP doesn't need DEP approval. As I said to you, we're out of the business, we're out of the process. We're just at the end, okay? So except for any permit requirements, of course, DEP is involved. You get whatever permits necessary to write the RAO. And the remediation process doesn't stop. You guys keep going. You're in the driver's seat. And then we will pass it on to our field offices. We have some great staff in the field offices that are reviewing our reports for us. And they will be doing the field inspections of the child care centers once the RAO is reviewed. So again, we're all in the same business of trying to keep kids safe and make sure that we all make the right decisions in this process.
Diane?
Yes.
Before we go on, there's, Lynn wants to add
The department will approve alternative remedies for schools and child care centers.
Yes.
So if you are subject to presumptive remedies, we will approve them. You do need our prior approval before implementing an alternative remedy.
Good point. Thank you, Lynn. You're right. Yep. All right. Well, based on our experience so far, just some common mistakes I want you to just be mindful of that we sort of see from time to time. The biggest thing is the missing PI number on the document. One of the first things that it asks you for, the boilerplate asks you for, is what the program interest number is. And a lot of people say, I don't know what that is. Well, I'll tell you how to find that. The PI number is issued when the retention form comes in, or when you submit a confirmed discharge form. Most times you don't submit the confirmed discharge report because there isn't a discharge. 95% of the time, it is generated from the retention form. So the minute you send that in, and it gets logged into our database, you have a PI number. You can look that up yourselves on Data Miner. Some people call us, some people email us, but I'm just letting you know, I'm putting it out there. You can see that information. You can call it up right on Data Miner. So you know right away what your PI number is. From time to time, we see some common mistakes. Entire site, leasehold, that gets a little back and forth sometimes, gets a little confusing, and sometimes we see that's not written properly. Sometimes people issue RAOs and they sort of mix things. They issue it to the developer and they put some parts of child care inserts in, but not all, or they don't put them in. And so, again, it goes back to who's doing the remediation and then who's getting the license. And sometimes they're very different people. So what I would say to you, if you have some type of site and the developer is intending to eventually put a child care center on there, they don't need to get a child care letter right away, an RAO right away. They can just get an entire site RAO, issue that, and then when and if a child care center does agree to come on board onto the property, then there's a play area now that they are going to build and gets built, and you can certify that the drinking water is safe, and then the child care center can present a child care RAO to Office of Licensing. So sometimes the timing is very different. You don't necessarily need to get an entire site RAO right away. You're only thinking they might want to get a child care center there. It may never come to fruition. As I just said a few seconds ago, sometimes we see some of the child care inserts or what we call notices are missing. Some are missing. There's only some there, not all of them. Usually they address the play area situation. They address the drinking water. Those are our key ones. RAOs without the child care language can't be used for licenses because it's very clear. It says drinking water and direct contact issues are paramount. So if the RAO doesn't have the standard boilerplate language, then it will be, you'll be asked to withdraw it. As I just spoke to this, the RAO sometimes will lack as-built. DCF can't issue a license on a play area that hasn't even been built yet. You don't even know if that's even going to get built the way the people think they're going to get it built. Sometimes the client will say to you, yeah, I'm going to have a play area, it's going to be this, 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 and then when they get the Office of Licensing, they'll go, no, this doesn't meet the right, standards or code or whatever. You need to tweak it a little bit. This is what you need. So when you start writing RAOs on hypothetical things that don't reflect reality, it loses its meaning. So refrain from doing like proposed work, get the work done so that the client has the RAO that actually reflects what's there, and then they can present it to Children and Families for their license. So that when Children and Families goes out to do their inspection, they will have the RAO, they will have the map in front of them. They will say, oh yeah, okay, yep, you said the play area is this big, and yep, play area is constructed of this, and blah, 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 blah. Everything jibes. Some common mistakes, sometimes RAOs are issued without play area language. It'll say there's no play area for the site. Well, guess what? Children and Families doesn't agree with that. In most cases, and I'm not going to speak for them because they do have exceptions to things, but in most cases, they want a play area. So your client really needs to be mindful of what is required of them and can consult with them. They have a toll-free number. Consult with them. They come out. They do a courtesy inspection. So we have seen instances where Children and Families will get an RAO and call us and say, oh, nope, they need a play area for this site. I don't know why they wrote an RAO like this. They need a play area. So if your client starts saying to you, well, this one doesn't need a play area, you might want to make sure that's confirmed before you write an RAO, and then you have to withdraw it and then write another one, and it's just a mess. Children and Families more than happy to assist. Sometimes the play area is too vague. Remember I told you, like, you want the letter to actually reflect what's there. Don't just say, yeah, there's a play area at the back of the property. Well, what does that mean? How big is it? What's it made of? Does it have play equipment on it? So details, please. Details. A good description might be, you have a play area located on the northwest corner of the property. It's constructed of pour and play surface, and the size is 75 by 100. Just so that you have it, everybody has an idea that we're all speaking the same language. Everybody knows what that means when they read that, as opposed to you have a play area in the back of the property. Sometimes the site maps are a little interesting. They lack some detail, or sometimes they're a little inaccurate, so I would just try to draw your attention to making sure that they're to scale and they have all the AOCs on there that you mentioned in your SID or in your report. It really should reflect all of the information that you submit to us should all reference each other, so the SID and the report and the maps, everything should jibe. Sometimes we've had inconsistencies between the forms that are filled out and the documents. So I just want to call your attention to, I know there's a lot of forms, but when you are retained and you do submit the different forms, just try to be mindful of being consistent in how you fill out the forms. Case inventory documents are a requirement. Sometimes they're incomplete, and they need to include all AOCs identified at the property. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean you're remediating every one of them, but you have to at least tell us what's at the property, so we all know, we're all speaking the same language, it all makes sense. And sometimes we just don't have we have a missing figure for the SID. There is guidance for the SID. That web is provided, so if you have any question or you're not too sure about something because you might have a unique situation, please, by all means, take a look at that. I will say 90% of these are pretty straightforward. There's always going to be quirky ones, and it's the quirky ones that sort of give everybody trouble, so we'll muddle through it together, but we'll figure it out. Let me just update a little bit on what we've been working on in addition to assisting with compliance assistance issues. The grant reimbursement program is still there. For those of you that are familiar with it, you know, once a PA was done, people were allowed to submit the application and get the $1,500 reimbursement. That is still available, so please tell your clients if you're doing a PA for them, for particular properties, for child care centers only, please have them submit the information. The application instructions and FAQs are being revised, but the program is still up and running. I have Sylvia Pierce here, who is from SRP, and she's our lead on that. She's taken that over, and she's helping me with a million other child care issues. So if you have any questions, Sylvia can help you. In addition, we have our website is under construction, and it is coming soon, hopefully by the end of the year. We have tons of drafts of stuff up there, so you could sign up for the list serve to receive those announcements. And we have a whole new bunch of FAQs and a whole bunch of everything on there. One of the things I know people have been sort of clamoring about is, and there's been rumor about it, is a guidance document. And yes, there is a draft guidance document. We've been working on it for quite a while. We've tweaked it here and there and everywhere. And there will probably be some type of announcement coming to have involvement from the LSRPs to assist in this creation of this finalization of this document. So be aware, there's something in draft. We will be seeking your involvement some point shortly, I'm sure, and we'll have another guidance document up and have that posted with the rest of the other ones. So I know that's a concern for a lot of people, and it should be, because it's only right to have something like that. Here I am again about age 4. I still have that haircut. I don't know what's going on with that. But anyway, I just would like to leave you with a few thoughts. You are the stewards of New Jersey's environment, soil, water, air, and now you're responsible for the health and well-being of children. So again, I'll say it, for the last couple of years we've been doing this. We haven't had any problems. Whatever sites we found that had contamination issues, we've addressed them, and now we're passing the baton to you. So choose wisely. If you have any questions, we are here. The entire, SRP staff is here to assist. You have all the other agencies here. We have Jocelyn Burseth, who's the Assistant Bureau Chief from Children and Families, and she'll be speaking in a little while. We have several of her supervisors that she can introduce when she does her spiel. We have Gary Centofanti from Department of Health. We have Amy Frank at the back here from Community Affairs. All their contact information is at the back of the talk. So if you have any questions, and I know you will because we have quirky things that come up every day, let's all talk about it. We'll figure it out, and in the end, we'll all try to do the right thing. So thank you for your attention, and I guess we'll turn it over to questions.
All right. Okay. We have one right here. Hold on.
I have two questions.
Oh, you're only allowed one.
Okay. One pertains to the RAO. If the CCC owns the property, an entire site RAO is required. But if it's a leasehold,
You could write an AOC. Yeah. All right.
can you write an RAO just
Yep.
for the property that will be
Yep.
occupied by
Yep.
the
Yep. You just have to
childcare
be
site?
mindful of the rest of the property and what is around the rest of the property.
Okay.
The AOCs on the property, whatever.
And that leads to the second question. An RAO must evaluate all media, and that includes air. There doesn't seem to be any emphasis on the RAO as to the quality of the ambient air around the play area or the building or wherever, although the RAO requires a survey of activities around the CCC. Wouldn't it be better to have an insert or be required to insert a chapter, a section that specifically addresses the potential sources of air contamination?
So am I hearing you're volunteering for that committee to work on that guidance document? That's what I'm hearing. Good points. Good points. We'll consider that.
Hi, thank you. I want to go back to the sampling, the play area slide, please. All right. So in two examples that you have, one is there's no suspected AOCs. You want the play area sampled anyway, and it's up to us to decide. Okay, fine. But if there's also a suspected agricultural area, I think the guidance document is pesticides, arsenic, and lead.
Right.
So if it's a suspected agricultural area, you want those plus other stuff? Because it sounds like you want other stuff no matter what.
It's not what I want. It's what you want.
Well, I mean, on one hand, you said it's professional judgment. You kind of took the professional judgment away from us
No,
by saying...
I would never
you-
do that.
Well, you said we have to sample no matter what. Right. So you're saying you have to sample no matter what for whatever it is that you want to sample for. Well, if we didn't believe we should sample at all, we're kind of in this weird world of like, well, I'm sampling even though you're telling me to, even though I don't think I should. And I think we all agree what typical contaminants there are.
Well, you're
Yeah.
right. I hear you.
So my point is, on the agriculture area, absolutely, pesticides, arsenic, lead. But it sounds like no matter what, there's always going to be PCBs and base neutrals and, PAHs no matter what. Is that fair to say?
I'm not sure, really, if I would say that, but go back to the concept of you're putting children on a play surface that's not covered. So you have direct contact exposure threats right there, and you don't know what could be in that soil. So that's why you really do have to look around and see what types of things could be
All right.
on that property.
So it sounds like there's almost
So-
like a minimum sampling, and then in addition, like perhaps if there is agricultural, be sure you do those other things. All right, one little quick. Then on the not needing an LSRP, all child care centers have to have a preliminary assessment.
Correct.
Okay. And then it was sort of like one of your slides says you don't need an LSRP if it's not subject to Madden based on the preliminary assessment. But doesn't the LSRP always have to issue an RAO for the preliminary assessment, whether it's Madden or not?
What was the last part? Doesn't the LSRP what?
Have to issue an RAO for the preliminary assessment?
No. In the case, one of the most common situations where that occurs, where you don't need to sample, the PA is done. One of the things that comes to mind is something like a church. A church decides they want to have extra money, and then they make their basement or their rec room a child care center. So there really wasn't any industrial operations on that property. It really doesn't meet any other trigger. They can just do a PA. They'll do a PA, and that'll bear out in the PA because they're already thinking they don't really meet any industrial, definition. So they do a PA. So we would issue an approval letter based on that. But if during the PA it is uncovered, oops, yeah, there was some historical operation at this whatever property, then you do have to switch gears and do have to hire an LSRP. And then the LSRP will do the RAO.
Diane, the points that he raised about what you sample for and when, and that's the kind of thing when stakeholders come to the table and look at that guidance document that hopefully can make it clear for everybody. Hold on.
Yeah, hi. I have a question regarding the play area also. Now, a lot of daycares have impervious covers in one area, and then they have a grassy area. And so sometimes the owners will say, well, we don't put them on the grassy area. They just go in that fenced area where there's an impervious cover. They have mats. Would you recommend that we also do the soil sampling? I mean, they're not signing a certification and notarizing saying we're not allowing the kids to go in the grassy area. Would you still encourage soil sampling from the area outside of?
Well, if you were doing an entire site RAO, yeah, I would.
I have another question here. A business has a 100 multi-acre site, and the area of impact is at the far end of the site, and they want to put the daycare center at the other. The Madden basically states that the whole site has to get the RAO, but is there a mechanism in which the daycare center could be considered an AOC and then just get a RAO for just that portion?
Does the property owner own the child care center?
Yes.
It's just the number one problem question. It does make sense to figure out to do something in that situation. Honestly, I mean, it really does. But it is problematic. But I think, I think we can maybe work through that in the guidance document, because when you think of the Madden bill and you think of how all this happened and how it was created, it was really about a postage stamp property. It really wasn't the 100-acre site, that they were thinking of. So when they said entire site, they're thinking, something that makes sense. And,
yeah, because or else.
So I totally get that.
Yeah, or else the company will have to subdivide it, which is just extra expense and timing, and doesn't really provide any additional benefit. So if something like that could be put in the guidance document, where the PA and the SI has been done, and it indicates that there is no impact in that area, but yet the company will
totally
still
get
do
that.
additional
You're right.
sampling to verify that where they're going to be citing it.
Yep.
Well, that should be something that should be looked into.
Yep. And, maybe we can explain it a little differently in the definition section of the guidance document as to what the child care center is. I don't know. It's something I struggle with. I totally get that. And it is a problem. We need to work something out for that situation.
Diane, could I just make sure I understand your answer about the church property? So it's a non-Madden site, and the PA finds nothing, no AOCs. So no RAO needs
Correct.
to be issued.
Correct. We'll issue an approval letter. They could still submit it to us.
Okay. What do they submit? Just
The
submit?
PA.
Okay.
and we'll review it, and if we concur with that, again, we'll do a comprehensive review, so we'll go through our records as well, and if we concur with that decision, that there aren't any AOCs, there isn't any industrial property use historically there, blah, 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 we will issue the approval letter.
Can I ask one more while I have the mic? In the case of relicensing, and they've gone through the PA process 3 years ago, what is it they need to do? And in fact, they have an RAO from 3 years ago.
Well, Children and Families will explain that to you. It's sort of like a recertification that they can go through.
So it's
So
not
they
a-
don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, no. I know people don't think so, but we really do try to keep it real and try to make sense of some of these things. We really do, we struggle.
Yeah, question that goes back to the issuing of the RAO with regard to site drawings. If you have a playground area, and presumably if you're an LSRP, you have an area of concern, or you've sampled, or there's some remediation. There's been some talk with regard to the mapping submittals and compliance with the GIS requirements. I had some discussions with Bill Hose a while back about that, and the submission of data with regard to GIS coordinates for sampling points, so on and so forth. Has there been any resolution of that with regard to, you know, if you're going to end up submitting drawings of playgrounds and sampling points, you're really forced to use the surveyor at that point.
Correct.
And then submit the GIS shape files.
Correct.
Well, the expense can get quite high for that.
Okay, I agree.
So, you know, there was some talk a little while back about maybe there being an exemption there.
Yeah, no, I don't really see that happening.
Okay, and part B of my question goes back to the sampling requirement. Are you saying then there are sites that could go with a preliminary assessment, no areas of concern, no sampling, even in the playground area, yet if there is an LSRP involvement, you're requiring sampling even if there's no area of concern? I mean, where's the technical guidance, or it seems to fly in the face of the tech rules and or any existing guidance documents. When there's no AOC, we still have to sample?
Well, it depends on what the play area surface is.
If it's a lawn.
Oftentimes a play area has a surface covering, so then you don't have to sample.
Well,
Or sampling's not required, or
in the case
whatever.
of a new facility,
Again, I have to say, it doesn't happen very often. There are only a handful of times that it happens, seriously.
so
In
if
most
there's a surface
instances-
of any kind, then you're not requiring sampling? I'm just looking for clarification here.
Yes, that's correct.
Even if it's mulch.
Depending on how much mulch there
So
is,
even
yeah.
if you don't have a presumptive remedy type of covering, you don't have to sample. Even if you're under Madden and you're going through an RAO with an LSRP. If there's no area of concern, no sampling. If there's a surface.
It will
over-
have to depend on your professional judgment at that point. I can't speak to, every site's different.
I know,
The setting and how much the thickness is and what type of activities are in the play area. You know, if they have play equipment, odds are that the mulch material gets churned up. They're, more active with play equipment. So there's so many different nuances to each site. It really does have to boil down to your professional judgment, honestly. And I'm not trying to not answer your question, but I can't say one thing and then at every instance that's going to apply to every center. It just doesn't work that way.
All right, okay, we're going to go on to other questions. We have a bunch of people on the web. Diane is going to be here until 4 or after, so we're going to go to Roger.
Thank you. One point, according to Sarah and ARCS, Diane, there is no exemption for a non-LSRP submittal to do a preliminary assessment. The only non-LSRP exemptions are for certain circular and recro sites. That's all that exists under the law and current regulation. So that whole process is totally out of the box.
It is out of the box, and it will be changing.
Bigger problem is as currently implemented, how can an LSRP rely on obsolete and fragmented guidance that are inconsistent with the technical requirements for site remediation, ARCs, and the existing preliminary assessment guidance? This whole process is arbitrary, capricious, and therefore unenforceable, not to mention inconsistent with Governor Christie's executive order.
Okay, thank you.
We know who's going to be on the committee or who won't be on the committee. We're not sure. No, we understand. This is why, and we have a lot of hands up in here, but we know there's a lot of confusion, and it's still being worked on. That's why we came here today. So we're going to take a couple of questions from the web, and we're going to say, if areas of concern are identified on the property but outside the leasehold for the CCC, when do those areas of concern need to be dealt with, and by whom?
Well, I
That's
would
a good
say the
question.
property owner would need to deal with them.
Whoever owns...
Child care is a little different in that oftentimes you're dealing with a leasehold, a lease. So we are not going to have the child care center remediate somebody's property. That's not fair to them either. So ultimately, it is the property owner's responsibility. So,
LSRP or whoever it is.
Right. So whatever timeframes are in the rules, they will have to adhere to.
Right.
They have a discharge.
Right. Okay, it's my understanding that the only way to file a retention form is electronically. Is that true? Is that true? But you need a PI to submit the form electronically. If you're retained, I don't think, is this right? This isn't right. There's yes and no. People are saying yes and no. All right, we've got to look into this. It can't be.
That was just implemented, that electronic system.
Do you know this? He doesn't know
That
this.
was just implemented.
All right, listen, you know what we can do? During
I'm
the
going to
break,
say within the last month, it was just implemented, something like
do
that.
this through the portal? Is this
Yeah,
through
right,
the portal
exactly.
thing? We'll see if we can get somebody from that section to let us know if that's right, or let them know that it's problematic.
I believe what we're doing is, and I don't quote me exactly, but we are, I believe, emailing the individuals, or there's a plan to email the individual once the PI number gets generated. So this is just something new that I think is voluntary now for child care to submit the retention form electronically, although I think in like January or February it will be mandatory. Right now it's, I think, a voluntary basis, so our IT people are working out some of the kinks to that. So I don't have all the answers today, but I know it's in the process of being worked on.
I guess let's see if we can find it out during the break.
Okay.
Okay. Let's take, do you have another one over here? Okay.
Hi, Dan. You and I had a discussion about the church situation about a month ago, and you had said no RAO, and yet somebody, I guess, in licensing said you did need an RAO. Did you get that resolved, or does the right hand know what the left hand's talking about these days?
I have to apologize. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't remember which one that was.
And you can discuss
If you want to
site-specific-
talk to me after and give me
I
the
will,
name
I
or
will.
whatever, I'll
Okay.
go find out for you, but I deal with so many questions and emails every day. Sorry.
problem.
Everyone is very special to her, but she may not remember each one. Okay, do the rules apply to a tutoring facility located in a strip mall?
Well, now you would have to ask that of Children and Families. They're the ones that will determine whether or not that facility is regulated under the program or not. So there have been instances where I don't think, right, tutoring people, I don't think so.
Okay. As probably most of you know, there are many different names that the facilities call themselves.
Oh, yes.
Whether they
Oh,
call
yes.
themselves a camp or a tutoring facility. If indeed it is just tutoring, and we would look at the parameters of how they're doing the tutoring, if they're not subject to licensing, then of course you would have to answer that question.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so certainly there are many programs out there. There are many programs out there that are not subject to licensing. So we would only, the licensing rules would only apply to facilities that are licensed.
Wouldn't that be the operator's responsibility, the LSRP, to figure out what they fall under?
I think what happens sometimes is that our office gets complaints about, like, say, like when I saw the tutoring question, sometimes what happens, questions come up to us as to whether or not a particular site would need to be licensed. And then it's our staff that make a determination based on the services that they're providing with the children as to whether or not the site would have to be licensed. No. No.
No, somebody asked a question and we're answering it, and she said it depends.
You just need to be mindful of these situations so that if your client does ask you, you can say, well, it's something you need to talk to children and families about. That's all. So it's just kind of FYI that you need to know some of these things.
Okay, so we have another question from the web. Regarding the statement that a RAO include as-built for the play area, how can you include an as-built when the CCF can't get a construction permit to build the facility without the RAO in the first place?
Well, you can. You don't have to write a child care RAO. You can write an RAO for the property and then do whatever you need to get done as far as your building permit or whatever. And then right, to complete remediation, but maybe not to build a play area. Yes, you're right. It does allow for remediation. You're right.
But the RAO allows for... No, the Madam Act allows you to get a construction permit to complete the work needed to obtain the child care center.
So, you know what? I'm going to ask you to repeat that answer. We're having audience participation. Hold on.
The Madden Act has a carve-out to allow you to get a construction permit to complete the construction necessary to effect the remediation.
Yes, it does.
Can I ask my question?
Thank you, David.
Just a couple of quick things. Am I led to believe that we can't use an elevated background clause in our RAOs for a child care center?
An elevated background. Yeah, no, you can. Yeah, sure you can. You just have to cover the play area. You have to eliminate direct contact exposure, that's all.
Right, but would that require a deed notice? An institute?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. One last thing. And this is really an issue. I have other questions for others. But we face a third-party kind of liability issue in this practicing. We're retained by a child care center who may or may not have a tenancy agreement yet, who don't own the property, but we're hired to do a PA. If we find an area of concern and we test it and it turns out to be contaminated, obviously it triggers this very strong spill notification. And in effect, we're going to be creating an impairment or revealing an impairment on someone else's property for whom we have no contractual relationship. And for me, it's...
That's been going on for 5 years.
It's like a garden shed. I try and swallow it and it sticks in my throat. So I'm just wondering what
it's been like that for 5 years.
And it's like that everywhere you do a PA, you might run into the same.
And sometimes it
well,
has
that's why they don't, but they often, no, but... yeah, that's why most people don't hire... Right, but that's why most people don't hire LSRPs to do their PAs.
All you have to report if you're hired by the property owner. If you work for a non-property owner, you do a PA, you don't have to report.
There's a lot of debate about that, and we'll take that outside later. But we have another question in the back. Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with you.
All right, and that doesn't seem very protective if you're going to put a child care center there, but...
So it sorry, I know you guys can move on with that and have a private discussion. It seems like most of the interest is with regard to direct contact standards. What's your stance if sampling is collected and you identify elevated above default impacted groundwater?
Then people have had to do groundwater investigations or come up with an alternate standard.
Would you prohibit the start of a child care center on a facility where it's still below direct contact?
I don't prohibit anything. You are all in the driver's seat.
Well, I guess the question, let's say it's, the child care facility is on, you would have to evaluate whether a discharge occurred at that place and whether that impact to groundwater is generally what can be left behind. It's not the groundwater trigger. It's not a trigger for groundwater, but what can be left behind. And if you're not investigating a discharge, I'm not sure it triggers anything, to be honest.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you. A question, because with this impact of groundwater screening levels that have come up, we have, we're held, what with lead, we have a very strict, we have a 400 parts per million residential criterion, but the impact of groundwater screening is a lot lower. If during this subsequent IEHA portion, a lead-based paint inspection goes to a risk assessment, and you end up doing a soil sample, and it comes up above 400, or even just above 59, where do we stand there? Is there going to be an obligation upon the indoor environmental consulting firm to kind of throw this back, and because it's a discharge, or it's an issue that has to be addressed, because we can't step over the impact of groundwater levels? There's a, that.
I don't know what to say. These kinds of debates are going on inside and outside the department, and I think that the way our rules are written, it matters if it's a discharge or not. You can go anywhere in the state and you can find something above an impact to groundwater number, but it wouldn't apply if no discharge occurred, because you're trying to figure out how much you can leave behind from a discharge that won't continue to degrade the groundwater. So you can't, I don't think you should use that data and information to trigger you into the program. You know what I mean? Right. Right. It's a lot. It's a question in logic, and it's not that.
Well, if there are lead paint issues,
we have more.
Department of Health, I think, has some.
Did he say lead?
If a site is issued
louder, please.
If a site is issued an unrestricted RIO, okay, and has no natural impact. Even the simplest expansion, like putting in a new swing set in your playground, will require a new RAO?
No.
No. Okay, so you can expand a playground without...
Oh, you're talking about oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about a site in general. You're talking about a child care center.
Yes, child care site. So
I
what I
believe
understand
if
is
you
have
change the play area, yes, I believe you do have to do that.
So when you proceed with one of these preliminary assessments that doesn't require an RAO, if you make a change to the playground or the building, are you required to go through the procedure again?
Well, yeah, it has to be looked at. Yes, it has to be evaluated. How do you know you're not putting the swing set on top of an underground storage tank, a heating oil tank or something? Yes, it has to be evaluated.
When you did your initial preliminary assessment that says you didn't need an RAO, you evaluated the whole property already?
Well, you still could have issued an RAO and still had an active heating oil tank that heats the building. And if you move the play area on top of it, so yeah, it has to be looked at. Yes, it does.
All right. What we're going to do is we're going to take a break. We're a little past when we were supposed to take a break. I was just talking to Phil. Phil Brilliant is going to be doing case studies. He will be able to talk a little bit about the LSRP's perspective on some of these issues that you raised, and then what we'll do, we will stay. We can stay as long as we need to stay to answer questions, but yeah, except for you. Okay, you all know who I'm pointing to. Even on the web, they know. But so we're going to take 15 minutes to take a break. There's coffee and refreshments in the back. You guys on the web, take a break, and we'll see you in a few.
Yes.
Sean, yeah, Sean, how's it going? Not bad, you? Doing okay? Doing okay?
No, my client goes away a lot, and they never signed the lease.
They never signed the lease.
They were there for the discussion about the settlement of the landlord tenant issue, but they never signed the lease, so it's kind of...
Because I know the other day I saw then it came back up again because also the attorney left.
Chris went somewhere else, but he took it with him, the file, and I know that they,
No, I didn't mean to get all into that. I just want to say hi.
how can that RAO certain features write a remediation then you're going to write all the inserts and attach them to the previously issued RAO where you can revise. What if we don't have anybody to build the facility yet? I got an issue in RAO, but I don't have you're going to have to revise your RAO.
All right, we're going to get started again, get back on track. Everybody please get your seats. All right, especially you LSRPs are going to get credit for this. You better get back. And you, don't sticking out your tongue. Come on. All right. Come on, get back. Get back. All right. We had a question from the web about the submittal in the portal, and we have our resident expert here that is going to answer that question, or was it a statement? Anyway, Elaine Dewan.
Once again, I had to come out of the closet. So, I won't make a sarcastic remark. I could make many. Anyway, since this topic is about child care, I'll just filing your retention form online for child care. I know that there was something that went out that mandated people to use the portal come mid-December. We have relaxed that to mid-January. Also, when you go to file your retention form, the service does ask what you're filing for, and one of the options is child care. And the main reason why we have that up front is we know most likely you're not going to have a program interest number, a PI number. So you check that box, you fill out the rest of the information in the retention service. You certify, it comes to us. We have something known as a submittal approval area, and what that is, it comes into our initial notice clearinghouse group. And what they will do is they will create a program interest number for you. And you know how when you file things online, you usually get an email back with like a summary letter indicating what you just did? Your email will have what your program interest number is. And that is the number you're to use on all subsequent submissions to DEP. So I'm hoping that addresses your concern.
While we have you on the hot seat, what about if it's not child care, but you don't have a PI number?
There is a number you can call system administrator, and that goes into the initial notice group. We don't want to see retention forms for those items that are not subject to ARCs and SARA. So you don't have to be an LSRP. We don't really want you filing a retention form. If the board has some issues with licensing, you fill out through the audit, you fill out a form that indicates all the cases you were dealing with. So they'll have that information. If it's prospective purchase and you don't own the property and it's innocent and you're kind of exempt from SARA until you do something to actually assume liability, we don't want you submitting a retention form for that either. A new ISRA case. Well, hopefully a GIN was filed prior. If not, file your GIN and then you will have a case. Don't submit the form until you submit your GIN. Because the GIN is strictly an administrative process. It's like who you are and where you are. There really doesn't need to be a LSRP consultant filling out that info. So you can fill that out and then all your remedial stuff comes after, then file your form.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you, Elaine.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we're going to hear from Department of Children and Families, Office of Licensing, Jocelyn Burseth, the Assistant Bureau Chief.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'll try to be quite brief. My name is Jocelyn Burseth. I'm the Assistant Chief. We have 3 of our supervisors here with me today, Anna Smith, Cindy Schaefer, and Susan Morella. As you may already be aware, we license almost 4,200 centers, infant, toddler, preschool, before and after school programs throughout the state, follow up on unlicensed facilities. In the packet that we gave you, we kind of made it very brief there, but we gave you some contact information for our office. If you're going to be some of you do actually reach out to our office. If you're going to be reaching out to our office, suggest you reach out directly to a supervisor or a manager. The inspectors are only in the office typically once a week. And on the other side there's a contact information. You can go onto our website for our child care manual. I did not burden you down with the child care manual, but as some of you may be aware, we have proposed some new requirements, and we anticipate that those new requirements will be adopted soon. The reason I mention that is I know, like, a big area of concern well, with us, is the outdoor play area. And I know that's like, well, do they or don't they have to have an outdoor play area? And how come some of them don't or something like that? In those new requirements, which will be adopted soon, it will be very clear in those requirements that all new centers will have an outdoor play area. However, of course, if it's just a school-age program, they don't need to have one. So you still can always reach out to us for that information. Additionally, what I wanted to mention is that when new centers are going to be opening, typically they'll send to us for the application packet. The one packet you might see here is like child care center application contents. Really the only thing you'd want to look at is the checklist that they get, the information, the application instructions, because many times at the end of the day, wherever you get in the process, oh, I never knew I had to have a health clearance or something like that. Although it is overwhelming a lot of times for the new centers, they actually do get the information in a number of different ways. First of all, in the new center application package, also in the child care manual, whether it's the existing manual or the proposed regs that's in there. Additionally, a lot of centers will reach out to us for courtesy site inspection. We'll go out to a potential child care site, provide technical assistance. We'll give them a copy of a report, which actually does call for either whatever may apply, whether it's the RAO or in some cases they may already have a child care facility approval letter for that site. And additionally, sometimes on new construction or renovated buildings, they'll submit architectural plans. So that's another way that we do get the information out in terms of what may be required when they do get licensed. Anna, do you want to go over the checklist there?
Yes.
Trying to be real fast here because I think you have a lot of questions. But I did want to have Anna go over specifically some of the things on that new center checklist.
Right, on the new center checklist, just because, of course, we're getting questions.
Could you step closer to the mic?
Sorry. Specifically, we're getting questions about our constituents are telling us that you're saying stuff and they're saying stuff. Let me just make everything clear. The person they stated that they needed an RAO for the church, even though the staff may be out there using the words RAO and interchanging them with child care facility approval letter. So that may have been where, when you call, if you ask very specific questions, they'll be able to answer, them a little bit better. We do not need the entire PASI. We actually need the individual copies of just the RAO, copy of the water bill, the lead report, and the big one is the letter of prior use. We get a lot of arguments with that. It's in my PA. We can't pull it from the PA. It needs to actually be the one that comes from the construction official, which is regulated by the DCA. So the construction office will actually issue that for them. Once I receive the RAO, this has been happening a lot. I have a template. I look at everything that and I err on the side of caution. If there is something very anything different in there, if it's missing one thing or if it's added, something, I have to reach out to DEP, and then they have to, tell me if it's okay or not. So just because you give a constituent an RAO and then they call you and say, they won't accept this, they won't accept, that's not what's going on. I look at it, if there's an issue, I call them back and I tell them, this is what, this is what I need to do to get it approved through the, through DEP. What else were we doing?
Right. Well,
I'm sorry
sorry about that.
Right, I'm sorry again to make sure that everything is in there, the things that we've had that were missing, or the one with the naturally occurring arsenic. Is that what we need?
Well, actually, I do want to mention. I mean, this program. Well, I don't know if you would still call it new, but it's certainly all new to us, and so that's why we do frequently reach out. A lot of times, we'll reach directly out to the LSRP, or we'll reach out to DEP when we have questions.
Yeah, just so that you're aware of that. And then as far as the other packet in there is a renewal application packet. I think the question regarding someone had asked getting another RAO at the renewal of a license. And no, this is what we actually do. The constituents actually have to fill out a renewal attestation form, and basically they are responsible for letting us know if there are any changes to the, to the RAO or the child care facility approval letter, anything they had in the past. So then our staff actually read them again. An example that just came up was there was a child care center that had a well, and now they're on a public water system. So, of course, we then had to let that child care facility know that they need to hire an LSRP to do an amendment to the RAO. That's really...
Yeah, and I do want to mention, as you can see by that big long list of things, which we're not going to talk about all of them, but there are many other things that the centers have to do. It's not just, like say for a new center, it's not just the REO or the DOH clearance letter, or for the renewal application, the attestation form, but there's a lot of other things that they do to renew their license or to obtain the additional license. And certainly feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or if we can be of assistance. Sure.
Any questions for our friends from DCF? We have one back here.
Has the public commentary period ended on the revisions?
Yes, that ended quite some time ago.
I just have a consideration about the play area. I've done assessments in child care facilities in cities like Camden, for instance, where it's, maybe a row home or a storefront property in these urban centers where the physical property itself doesn't have an opportunity to construct a play area. Will they now be required to do an exterior?
No, we're definitely, any centers that are already in existence with a license, we're not going to go and close them down. It's just any new centers moving forward. And even though those centers, like say, for example, if they may not have a play area, they still have to meet a program requirement of taking the children outside daily. Okay? And actually, it's really funny, but there's going to be more restrictions, more requirements specific to outdoor play because of a nationwide concern about childhood obesity issues. So that's why there's a big push on, expanding play areas and expanding the amount of time in the outdoor play area, right? Things like that. So no, we're not going to be closing down centers that are in existence.
For new facilities, for new child care centers, when in the process do you issue the DCF number to them?
What happens is they get the DCF number. Once they submit the application and the fee, okay, that's when they get entered into our system and they get the number. That's when, once they get the number, they can go for the required fingerprinting for a criminal background check and the abuse registry check and things like that. So yes, it is difficult when you're submitting. If they haven't submitted the application to us yet with the fee, they don't have a license number. So I guess they could write pending.
Okay. Do we have anything? Okay. No, I think that's it for you for right now.
Okay,
thank
you
you for coming and participating.
And then last but certainly not least is Mr. Phil Brilliant, LSRP, going to go over some case examples.
Yeah, I agree to do this. But no. I guess first I need to know how to run this. Let's see, we'll go back. Okay, that is not me. No, it's not. So that I stay in front of the microphone, I apologize. I usually like to walk around, but I'll do my best to stay here. You heard a lot about from Diane. You heard also from DCF, and you hear it all the time. And when I talk to people, and we've been doing this. Oh, I get to walk around? Oh, this is great. Thanks.
Make sure it's on.
That's a lot easier. I'll apologize in advance for my back. So it is one of those jobs that we do as consultants before it became LSRP that probably has some of the lowest cost potential for the service you provide with the highest liability. Because as you've heard here today, and you're going to see throughout my slides, and you will constantly hear, our ultimate goal is the protection of the children at these child care centers. My goal today is to give you some case studies and really just give you some of my opinions, which when you come to the board you can't use against me. But at the same time, I'm not coming from the DEP side, I'm coming from the consultant LSRP side. I'll try to answer any questions you have relative to that to give you the best opinions that I have. But again, it goes back to when you're doing this work, and Diane, put it perfectly. It is a different type of program we have, and yes, right now, we're kind of operating without a guidance document. We're kind of operating in somewhat of a vacuum over the past 4 years? 5 years now, 5 years. And sometimes we make wrong decisions. We need to make sure that those wrong decisions that we make are still protective, that they're more administrative than they are technical. And I'll talk about some of the wrong decisions that I've made, because they're in my slides. Not that many slides. Who always puts him in the front row? What's changed since May 7th, 2012? When you're doing a child care center and they need a RAO, they need an LSRP. As you've heard already, it's for initial licensing only. It's for Madden law. There are some specific requirements when they have to have an LSRP to issue that RAO. Preliminary assessment, what's changed? Now I say up there nothing, but it's a little different than a normal preliminary assessment we may do, because as Diane said, we are looking carefully at what the surrounding properties are and how they may affect that child care center. Even if it's in a strip mall or if it's standing by itself, you still have to pay attention to what's around that property. Site investigation, really nothing's changed. And I'll talk about some of the playground areas that I've encountered and give you some of what I've run into. But again, if you have an area of concern, you need to propose what the proper sampling is of that area of concern. You have to implement the proper sampling of that area, and you have to report on it. So it's really no different than what we do on a daily basis, and I'll use the term consultants, LSRP, however you want a term on that. One of the things that I feel has changed, and I'm not going to take any shots at Gary, no, but the Department of Health requirement for this indoor environmental health assessment, which is probably about 2 years old now? 09, so 3 years old, is very different. And one of the biggest things that I always point out is if you're an LSRP, you cannot do that form. You have to be certified, is it? Certified? Certified in the Department of Health's program for that company to complete that form, for that survey. So that's something very different that people don't realize, is they go ahead and they start filling the form out and it says consultant, and then they realize, oh wow, I can't do this because I'm not certified in their program. There is a separate and distinct certification program through the Department of Health. And it costs you about $2,500 to get certified. Right? Is that what it is? $2,000. This is just a form I pulled out of a file. I don't know if it's current or not, so I apologize to DCF. But this just happens to be one that I had. And it clearly states when they're doing the indoor air assessment, what requires it to be done. And I will tell you, pay careful attention to what is letter C, because that is the one that people most often overlook. That's the one, they look, they say, okay, I have no dry cleaner, I have no nail salon, there's no high hazards, I'm good to go. But the building was built prior to 1978. So lo and behold, you have to do the assessment. And that's the one that gets caught most often. I will tell you, and remember the hair care products, I'm not just an owner, I'm also a client. Well, I'm not just an LSRP consultant, I actually run a nonprofit that has a child care center. So I had to go through the licensing process. I didn't do it myself, that'd be a conflict of interest. But basically it is something that we had overlooked as the child care center, because part of the property had been built prior to 1978, and we had to go back and do this. Costs. Probably the first thing you hear when you get that phone call. How much is it going to cost me to do this? I'm only getting $1,500 from the grant. Is that enough money? I will give you my opinion. It's not enough money. Okay? But when you price what you need to do, and I said it when I started, this is one of the jobs that's going to be your highest liability. And I don't care if you issue an REO and you feel very comfortable, at the end of the day, that liability goes out until that child care center closes. So you better make sure that you have looked at every area of concern, and that when you issued that REO, you feel comfortable that it's protective. Again, cost-wise, you should price it based upon what you think it's going to cost to do the job. And as you heard here, and I'm not going to go into all these prices, it's a little more than a standard preliminary assessment. It's not just looking at the property. There's a little more involved. When you're doing a site investigation, you're doing the report, there's not that much more involved than you would normally do, so you should price it based on what it is. And it's tough, because I will tell you that child care centers is not a very profitable business. People do it because they love kids. They don't do it because it's going to make them a millionaire. They do it because out of the goodness of their heart. And so money is very tight, and it's very tough at times. Plus, and I'll be nice, the indoor air evaluation is a $1,500 fee. The fee to submit the preliminary assessment site investigation have fees, and I can't, $450? $450. So they have fees on top of what they're paying us. It's very tight for them to make these. And again, in most situations, these are new centers that are being constructed, so they haven't even generated money yet. But yet they're paying all of us to do this work. Oh, there's my depends. Okay, the role of the LSRP, Diane really covered a lot of this. First and foremost is, what are you doing? When you're hired, what's the ownership of the child care center? Is it entire property? Is it just a leasehold? Know what you're getting into, because that's one of the biggest things that ends up coming back at the end, which could end up costing somebody more money. And we don't want to have that happen. Is it freestanding? Is it a multi-tenant facility? Okay, that goes back to also entire site, specific tenant. You have to look around the property for those high hazards. What are the other concerns on the properties next door? I did one which is not one of my examples, and just as a caveat, all of my examples are REO'd, so they're all public information. There are files at DEP, and any of the sites that I talk about are public information at the DEP also. So I'm not giving out any secrets. We did a site that was a church. It was adjacent to the Garden State Parkway, and they had a child care center. But their playground was out the back of the church, happened to be adjacent to a Superfund site. Okay? So they don't have that child care center, that playground area anymore. And I see people shaking their head, they know which one I'm talking about. But those are things, if you didn't look at surrounding property, you probably wouldn't have known what was next door. In this instance, you really should have known. Again, when you're issuing the REO, and I'll show you my REOs, what is the scope of that remediation? Is it the entire site? Is it just the tenant? And do you need a permit before you issue the REO? And I'll talk about that also. My beautiful pictures. This is a child care center. Don't remember exactly where it is. And you look at this, you're like, oh, this is good. It's a strip mall. Everything looks clean. This shouldn't really be a problem. And then you look at the next picture, and you notice the pizza parlor is next to a dry cleaner. Oh, did I go too fast? Oh, I hit the wrong button. There we go. Good? Okay. So you have to look at the entire picture. One picture doesn't tell the entire story. I did a class yesterday, and the example that I always give, and I think everybody in the room hopefully will remember this guy, we're Columbo when we're going out on these sites. If you don't know who the Columbo is, ask me later. But it's really what we're doing, because we have to do an entire investigation of that site to make sure that we're being protective. I keep saying that word over and over again. Okay, my first case study I'm going to give you, this is in Stafford Township. This happens to be a freestanding building. The property was cleared for the construction of this child care center. This actually happened to be a good one, an easy one. But what are the areas of concern? We had floor drains in the restrooms. They're all connected to public sewers. We had a detention basin for the site only. It wasn't a strip mall. There was no other drainage going into that detention basin. We had a boiler room. It was natural gas. Always had been natural gas because it was just constructed for the child care center. We had an irrigation well. It was 145 feet deep. It still was sampled. It was a new well. The rest of the property was on public water for drinking purposes. We talked about site maps before. This is an okay one. But it clearly shows everything that's on the site, and it breaks down the area of concern on one map. And remember, this is, the REOs for child care centers are a little unique because you have to attach your site map to the REO. And I believe that's probably because so DCF can see what we're talking about. Here's my REO. First, I'll immediately point out my first mistake. If you notice, it says preferred ID number. I forgot to put the PI number down. Not that I forgot to put it down, but I didn't have it assigned, and you can't do that. Okay? This was back in 2010. What's that? Well, they were a PO box for where they were. Oh, did it really? And by the way, the REOs I chose are ones that have already been through the process at DEP. So that's.
No, I missed it the first time.
Did you? Okay, there you go. So again, make sure your PI number's there. This happens to be a 2010 REO. The template has changed through the process, and I will tell you, I always go to the template that is attached to ARCs. Every time, even though it's not going to change anymore because it's in ARCs. It may change when there's made some modifications. I just always got into the habit of always going back to that form as opposed to having one saved on my computer just in case something had changed. Page 2, the key here, and Diane had talked about it, the notices. Okay. Now you'll notice this one is different than the next one I'll show you because it changed since this point. So, but it talks about building interiors not addressed. It talks about that it goes to, here it says Health and Senior Services, now the Department of Health. It talks about the play area. It talks about the potable well, the potable water on site. It catches all of the requirements of the Child Care Center REO. Ooh, I need to push it. Go back one. Okay. Last page, and the key to the REO at the end is, there are many people we have to copy when we issue the REO, in addition to DCF. And sometimes it tends to go off the next page, but you have to make sure you capture all of those so that you hit those people who are required to get a copy of the REO so that permits can be issued and they can operate the child care center. Case number 2, and this is one which is interesting. There were 10 AOCs identified. There was a heating oil tank on the property that was investigated as part of a site investigation, and the LSRP issued an REO. There was a play area that was covered. There was another area on the property which was a grassed dirt area, which the LSRP at the time determined did not require to be sampled because it wasn't part of the play area. In conversations, once the REO was issued, DEP had a conversation, and one of the questions that came up was, is that area used at all? So going back through notes and looking at questions with the property owner, the area is used for kickball. Well, there is direct contact there, and that was something that was overlooked. So the LSRP withdrew the REO. Now, I'll talk about this at the end, too. That is one of the most difficult parts, because when you issue the REO, for lack of a better term, this case is closed. It's going to DCF. They're issuing licenses. If something's being built, it's getting built because they're doing it based on that REO. In this situation, it was an existing structure. It didn't cause any heartache or concerns. The area was sampled. It was sampled because it had a historic pesticide situation. A new REO was issued. There was really no harm, no foul. If this was a new construction, if this was, somebody building a center, millions of dollars, whatever it might be, it could have been a real heartache. This happens to be the final REO that was issued. Remember to put the PI number on there. This was the reason why I asked about the DCF number, because it was pending at the time. So initial was what was put there. I don't know what the proper terminology might be. I'll answer anything once. Well, you want to hold it? I'm almost done. Hold it. I'm almost done. Okay? Right down. Okay. You'll notice, again, this is October 12th, 2012, so it's after ARCS is finalized in May. So this is the form that we're using now for the REO. The notice has changed for the indoor building interiors. Child care center notices are all detailed out. And one of the things I always say, and I just skipped over it, when you read your REO, and this is just general information, you got to make sure that you input the RP's name in that one paragraph where you have to put it in. The site, sometimes people overlook that. Again, your final page and all of your copies as to where everybody's getting copied on it. My last one, and as I start with this one, I will say, so I remember properly, this is before presumptive remedy requirements, and this is also before permit requirements that this REO was issued for this site. Because you'll see it's a deed notice. There was no permit at the time. Now you would need to have a permit. This site had historic fill. So when you're doing your preliminary assessment, and Diane touched upon this, you're looking at all areas of concern. This historic fill that was on this property, this happens to be in Jersey City. That's a beautiful map. And if I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at, but anyway, but no, it's a historic fill map. The site was there. That was an easy way of knowing that the site had potential historic fill. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you're not in an area that is clearly mapped by DEP or that you may have knowledge of, and you're going to uncover something in your investigation. That's all I can tell you. When you ask those questions about former site usage, about fill material brought to the site, that's always the catch-all. Another great map. Again, we had playground area. The playground area was capped. There were samples taken in the area to delineate where the historic fill had been. A deed notice was filed. Again, this predates our current requirements. I don't have the REO? I guess I didn't, right? I thought I did. No, I guess I didn't. And then the REO was issued with the deed notice. So that's the old school way of doing it. But again, we wanted to be protective of the children, human health, safety, and the environment. A couple things that I kind of used in that. There are DEP tools. And I know we've all had these training classes recently on how to use all of them. There are mapping tools. Use them. It's an easy sit at your desk looking at different things on data miner, on IMAP, whatever it might be to get you information about your site. And I'll tell you, somebody who had said to me, I don't know how to use it, so I didn't use it. Well, that's not an acceptable answer. It's the easiest way to get information. You should use it. I talked about this already, but keep in mind that your REO is going to be issued well before DEP may review your REO and your file. And again, Diane said they're doing comprehensive reviews on all these. So we need to make sure that we're protective. I said that. Liability, again, and I know there are many LSRPs, many firms that stay away from daycare centers. Okay? Not a high cost at times. It's very tough to get paid at times. And the liability is tremendous. So really know what you're getting yourself into. And don't forget about the indoor environmental health assessment, okay? Very important, it's required. I have a link there, which you can't click on, but it is something that you have to make sure that you cover.